think South Korea have just done the impossible. They have taken the United States down to the losers bracket. The United States, the reigning champions, are now facing elimination in the finals weekend.
The upset of the year, anybody beating the United States is going to be an incredible upset. That is just a script that you would take to Hollywood.
This team was dead. We saw it with our own eyes. For the longest time, all we felt was indomitable reign from the same powerhouse. A historic winning streak was built and continued through years and years of untouchable prowess. But then that all came crashing down in the blink of an eye. 4 years of perfection came to an end, and in an instant, all the narratives changed. No longer were we talking about who was going to be the ones to beat them. For once, we were talking about who was going to be the new team to rise to the top and make history. This didn't just feel like it was the end of an era. It felt like it was the beginning of a new one. The beginning of an era where the game wasn't controlled by one team. An era where Osu's biggest tournament wasn't just a foregone conclusion. And more importantly, it was supposed to mark the start of an era of parity.
5 years in a row. 2018, 19, 20, 2021, and now 2022. United States continue their dominance of Osu standard.
We wrote them off. We said they were done. We all thought that their time at the top was up and convinced ourselves that this would mark the start of something new. But in the end, the demon that has been haunting all of us for the past 7 years comes out on top once again in spite of all the narratives and doubt we casted against them. We were all so close to witnessing the team we all wanted to lose finally come up short. We were all so close to witnessing something different at an OWC for the first time in years. But we were met by the same fate that we were all too familiar with. This outcome is historic, but leaves most of us with some uncertainty and fear. And that's because the United States should have never won this OWC. With their win at the 2022 Osu World Cup, the United States have won their 5th OWC title in a row and 7 out of the last 8 renditions of the Osu World Cup. And as their winning continued, the community as a whole got more and more tired over time. In their first few years of winning, they were the underdogs. They were the ones that weren't expected to contend for first place in contrast to some of the other teams, and yet they somehow found a way to make it out on top. Believe it or not, there was a time where everyone was happy to see the US win. At one point, they had absolutely no success at an OWC, and seeing them rise to the top, it was nothing short of an incredible Cinderella story. But that immersion wore off quickly. The United States went from underdogs to a godlike dynasty in record-breaking time. Over time, they've become so much of a powerhouse that there wasn't a single team that could even come close to matching their prowess. The more they kept winning, the more it frustrated everyone, and every single year they always found a way to get better and better. Perhaps the most extreme example of this was the 2019 Osu World Cup, where the United States lost only 3 maps while winning 37, including their last 25 in a row to win the Osu World Cup. It was as if the teams they were facing were non-existent. Every single match was over before it even started. And dare I say it, they made the Osu World Cup boring to watch with how lopsided every single match was. It was as if hell froze over because the US took that fire and used it to torch every single opponent they came across. With the current state of the game, this cannot possibly be replicated ever again. And thankfully, the United States haven't done something like this ever again. However, just because they were no longer destroying every team to the brink of humiliation did not mean they were no longer a force to be reckoned with. They might have not been as strong as the year prior, but the United States in 2020 were still the overwhelming favorite to win the Osu World Cup. And we were all proven right. They continued to breeze through their competition like it was nothing. And we all collectively thought that the tournament organizers should just cancel the entire tournament and hand them their OWC badges right then and there. But sometimes when you're that good, you can get a bit overconfident. And in the grand finals, their cracks finally began to show. Germany would emerge from the losers bracket to get the run back against the United States in the grand finals. Maps were traded back and forth, and eventually the United States saw themselves with a 6-4 lead. While everything seems pleasant for the US, this performance in comparison to their peak was awful. Throughout the entirety of the 2020 Osu World Cup, they only lost 5 maps prior to the grand finals, and previously they swept Germany in the semifinals 6-0. But this time around, things were tightly contested, and it continued to get worse. Germany would win their final pick of the match to close the lead to 6-5, and despite having a breakpoint advantage and being on match point with 1 map pick remaining, the United States would lose their final pick of the match, which tied the match at 6 apiece. The US did up winning the grand finals and the entire tournament in the tiebreaker, but this 7-6 victory was a telltale sign that it was possible for them to be befelled. But most importantly, it gave everyone else hope. This proved that they were beatable. They might still be the best team, sure, but for the first time in a long time, they were beatable. Fast forward to the 2021 OSU World Cup, and for the first time in a long time, the United States were no longer the favorites to win it all. Whether everyone was fatigued from seeing them winning every single year or the promise that Germany showed, everyone predicted that this was Germany's year. And starting out, this seemed to be the case. The United States roster in 2021 was statistically the worst it had ever been in a long time. The metaphorical elephant in the room about this roster was that Vaxei was nowhere to be found, and a common narrative was driven into everyone's minds. No Vaxei, no W. And this seemed to hold true. They were losing more maps than they ever had before, and the roster felt weaker than ever. When they went up against Germany in winners finals, it felt like they would finally meet their match. Once again, both teams would battle it out in a match that would be decided in a tiebreaker, but just like last time, the United States pulled it out by the slimmest of margins. Both teams would face each other in the grand finals for the second year in a row, and this time, it felt like their time was up. Both teams fought their way to a 5-5 scoreline with no break points surrendered throughout the entire match. The United States would put themselves at match point with a 6-5 lead after winning their final pick of the match, and so it all depended on Germany to force tiebreaker. But then, in one of the most destructive finishes we have ever seen, the United States came out on top for the fourth year in a row, much to everyone's dismay. This might have been the most pissed off anyone has ever been while watching the OSU World Cup. Everyone was sick of it. Absolutely no one wanted to see them win. We've been getting closer and closer to having the United States finally lose an OWC for the first time in a long time, but to no avail. They would always come out on top, but heading into 2022, they would face their toughest test yet. The 2022 OSU World Cup was hyped up to the level it received because for the first time in a long time, there was actual competition among the best teams in the world. We weren't going to get United States versus Germany in the grand finals for the 50th time in a row. Every other elite team had a legitimate chance at making history and winning it all. However, the tighter competition did not mean that the US was getting any worse. The United States still emerged as the number 1 seed of the tournament, and they were still the favorites to win the entire tournament despite the increased competition. Chaos was the name of the game of the 2022 OSU World Cup, as you could never assume the outcome of any match until it was actually over. And straight out the gate, the United States looked sketchy. In the first round against Israel, the United States inexplicably lost the first 2 maps of the match, including a break point to go down 2-0. They would win the last 5 maps in a row, but this was a huge red flag to us all. Clearly there was something different about this team, and we all knew it. But those thoughts immediately died out as the United States would completely sweep Singapore 5-0 in the round of 16. But all this did was make what would happen in the upcoming weeks more shocking. After their win against Singapore, the United States had to go up against Hong Kong in the quarterfinals. Sawada and Fancy Lad were absent from this match for various reasons, but this was the United States we're talking about. The best team in the world. They shouldn't have a problem with this match even if they were missing 2 of their players, is what we all thought before they were somehow tied at 4-4 against a team they should be destroying. This was the proof we needed to know that their days were numbered. The US were just dropping way too many maps to be taken seriously in the later stages of the tournament. And entering the semifinals, they can't do this if they wanted to win. Their opponent in the semifinals was South Korea, who just completed an incredible comeback against Canada to make it here. With all of their momentum and the United States suboptimal performances, there was a sneaking suspicion that a miracle could happen. But that didn't seem to be the case as the United States had match point with a 5-3 lead with a breakpoint advantage. However, like I said previously, chaos is the name of the game in the 2022 OSU World Cup, and what felt like a guaranteed win for the US quickly turned into a disaster. Despite their lead and breakpoint advantage, in the final stretches of the match, they crumbled. Karcher karched all over them as South Korea took the last 3 maps in a row to win the match 6-5. And in an instant, the longest winning streak in OSU history was over. 4 years of perfection was gone just like that. The US were nowhere near their best, but none of us could have possibly expected this to happen. Now they were at risk of being eliminated before they even reached the top 3. This was madness. No words can describe the elation we all felt when this match ended, but the same thought rushed into all of our minds. The United States' time at the top is up. Finally, there will be a new team at the top. Finally, this unstoppable force has been vanquished. We were finally going to bring an end to the longest first place streak in OWC history. But remember, there's always the losers bracket, and you better make sure your demons are dead before they come back to haunt you. The United States now had to win their next 5 matches in a row to win the OSU World Cup, and now they were 1 loss away from elimination. With the increased pressure of being in the losers bracket, what exactly did the US do? Well, they absolutely did not take their loss lightly. Their first match in the losers bracket was against Romania, a dark horse candidate to make a deep run at OWC. They took care of them 7-1. Their next and debatably toughest test yet was against Poland, the number 2 team of the tournament and one of the few teams everyone felt like stood a good chance of taking down the US. Now was a good time to end their run, but Poland's season was cancelled early this year as the US would defeat them 7-3. Now they were guaranteed a top 3 finish, but things continued to get more difficult. Their next opponent was Germany, and everyone went into this match thinking that this would be a tightly contested match with a lot of twists and turns. After all, this was the matchup of the 2 previous grand finals of OWC, and Germany is a contender for first place. Surely, the United States won 7 maps in a row to win the match 7-1 to advance to the grand finals. Now we were seeing the version of the United States that struck fear in everyone for the past few years. They were destroying the world's best team so badly, we feared what the outcome in the grand finals would be. We were watching a completely different team being born right in front of our eyes. A team that took the negative narratives against them and shoved them down their opponents' throats. The US were on a massive tear and completely dismantled some of the world's best teams, but still, the odds were stacked against them. They had to win 2 matches in a row against South Korea, which on its own is no easy task. And historically, teams emerging from the losers bracket of OWC did not have a good track record in the grand finals. The last 6 renditions of the OSU World Cup were won by the team that advanced to the grand finals in winner's side. In that time span, 3 bracket resets happened, but the winner's bracket team always ended up victorious in the bracket reset match to take the tournament. The last time a team won both the first and second match of the grand finals after being sent to the losers bracket was in 2015. But guess who were the ones that did that? The United States. They did this for their first OWC victory, and they've never looked back since. But enough of giving in to our demons and reliving the past things they've done to us. The times are different now. South Korea has shown that they are capable of taking down the US. The first match of the grand final started, and then everyone proceeded to have their soul sucked out of their body as the United States put on a 7-1 stopping to force a bracket reset. Everyone's mentality was gone. There was no hope left. This team that we all counted out, this team that we all wished a downfall on became the same demon that tormented OSU's biggest stage for the past few years. Across both matches of the grand finals, there was a stretch where the United States won 8 maps in a row as the rampage through the tournament continued. It felt like the gods of the universe didn't want the US to win anymore because they decided to literally possess Utami. The otherworldly forces were doing anything to stop the US from winning. But apparently, not even the powers of God himself can stop them because Utami immediately turned around and FC'd the next map. The ending was inevitable, and as the 7-4 scoreline in the second match of the grand finals was set in stone, the losers bracket run was complete. For the first time in 7 years, the losers bracket champion defeated the winners bracket champion twice in a row, and the United States won the 2022 OSU World Cup. And the scariest part about this is that after losing, they got stronger. The United States won their final 5 matches in a row, all in dominating fashion against the best teams in the world to win their 5th OWC title in a row and their 7th in the last 8 years. These 5 matches came in the losers bracket during the finals and grand final stage of the tournament. And do you want to know how many maps they lost against the world's best teams in the losers bracket? 10. 1 against Romania, 3 against Poland, 1 against Germany, 1 in the first match of grand finals against South Korea, and 4 against South Korea in the second match of grand finals. They played the number 2, 3, 5, and 11 seeds of the tournament all in a row while being 1 loss away from elimination, and they only lost 10 maps total in the 5 matches against them. You heard this correctly. This puts their record in the losers bracket at a remarkable 35-10 in the finals and grand finals of OWC. 5 matches, 35-10. It felt like the longer the tournament went, the stronger the US got, and eventually, their strength was too much to overcome as they put on one of the most dominant losers bracket runs in OWC history. This shouldn't have happened in the first place. They had to battle the negative narratives against them, and they had to deal with being in the losers bracket for the first time since 2017. This team looked like a shell of their former selves, but somehow, at the end of it all, they found a way to make it to the top in the most chaotic OWC to date. The more things change, the more things stay the same, and the United States have once again returned to their place at the top of the OSU world. And they should have never won this OWC. They shouldn't even have been here in the first place. In 2015, they won by just a tiny sliver in the HP bar. In 2016, they just got lucky. 2017 was a disaster where they blew a massive lead. In 2018, they were literally getting soloed by 1 player. 2019 was just unfair. 2020 showed that they were getting worse, and 2021 showed that they were getting even worse than that. 2022 was the year they would fall. Their team just isn't as good anymore. They can't handle the pressure. They can't win without They lost 2 maps. They're bringing in too many new players. This is Germany's year. They lost 4 maps Poland to Hong Kong. They can't win forever. Lost to South Korea. They're making OWC weekends.
The United States proving why they are the team that is the most dominant in the history of OWC. They go down to losers bracket. They don't care. They make a run. They make it back up to the grand finals.